From the GRAYMAN briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more. Now, the latest from GRAYMANbriefing.com. Here's this week's Sword, read out by Super Essie.
We're going to be covering updates from the past 2 weeks in this new Sword, including key updates on election security, legal rulings on gun rights, and global conflicts. We discuss incendiary attacks on ballot boxes, Supreme Court decisions on non-citizens voting, nationwide protests planned around Black Friday, also market shifts post-election, whistleblower claims in response to how FEMA has been handling things, and Taiwan's halt on chip production for China. Let's begin with civil unrest and election security. So this is more election related. So in Portland and Vancouver, 3 ballot boxes. Obviously this is not brand new news, but I want to cover on it because we didn't touch on it in the last broadcast. So 3 ballot boxes were destroyed by some sort of explosive or incendiary device. The devices had the following labels written on them: Free Gaza and Free Palestine. Investigators believe the incidents are connected, but have not confirmed if they are genuinely tied to pro-Palestinian activism or intended to sow discord. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian groups continue to call for election disruptions and label both Trump and Harris as war criminals. Some of some of pro-Palestinians, some of their groups are actually sharing flyers showing ballot boxes on fire. So you tell me if it's connected. The U.S. Supreme Court issued an emergency ruling allowing Virginia to resume removing non-citizens from voter rolls, overturning a lower court's block on that process. So keep in mind, we're giving you an update of some election security related stuff prior to the election, but this broadcast is actually published about a week or so after the election. In D.C., officials are preparing for large-scale riots and civil unrest surrounding the upcoming election and inauguration. Security measures were strictly enforced, with local law enforcement and federal agencies on high alert. Moving into legal updates and First and Fourth Amendment updates, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear oral arguments for Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton on January 15th of 2025. The case challenges a Texas law requiring age verification for websites with content deemed harmful to minors. The case's outcome could impact online content regulation and access to adult content, including not just pornography, but other things that they may deem harmful to minors, such as firearms. Moving into censorship, bias, and the privacy briefing that the GRAYMAN briefing published. Leaked documents reveal that the Center for Countering Digital Hate, that's the CCDH, has been pressuring advertisers to withdraw from X, or Twitter, aiming to destabilize the platform under Musk ownership. CCDH's actions and collaborations with officials in the US and UK have raised concerns over its non-profit status. CNN permanently banned a conservative commentator after a comment made on air about a pro-Palestinian co-panelist. The conservative commenter said that basically he's glad that the pro-Palestinian commenter didn't have his pager ring. So, kind of relating back to that Mossad attack on terrorists. So, anyway, that comment didn't go over well, and CNN said you can't come back. A Joe Rogan podcast with Trump encountered inaccessibility issues on YouTube, where users struggled to find the video, even using common searches such as Rogan Trump podcast. The New York Times, Media Matters for America, and the Washington Post are pushing YouTube to censor content they flag as election misinformation, raising concerns about censorship impacting open political discourse. The FBI is seeking increased surveillance powers despite recent breaches in its own data security. The agency also wants reauthorization of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which faces, obviously, criticism over its privacy violations. The White House is considering appointing an information czar to address foreign election disinformation. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has acknowledged the idea, though it raises concerns, obviously, about free speech and government control over narratives. Now we're going to continue on with some more election security briefings. And again, these are prior to the election. Bucks County closed an early voting site due to reports of fake poll workers discouraging workers. In Lancaster County, also in PA, officials are investigating 2,500 suspicious voter registration forms with identical handwriting. In Michigan, errors in Dominion ballot marking devices are impacting or were impacting disabled voters using straight ticket options. Dominion was working to correct those issues with the Michigan Department of State. In California and Oregon, again, remember those ballot boxes that were burned. Also, in Lane County, USPS mailbox key was stolen, which caused a whole array of security concerns. In Washington, Nevada, and Oregon, governors activated their National Guard ahead of the election. In Colorado, a spreadsheet containing voting machine passwords was inadvertently posted on the Secretary of State's website. In Michigan, early voting data shows sign of possible duplicate voting, with officials noting registered voters exceeding eligible votes in many cases. In Kentucky, a voter in Laurel County reported a voting machine malfunctioning, which switched their vote for Trump to Harris. Officially, investigators have said it was user error. Texas, so concerns over voting machine security arose after a Dallas poll worker found a sheet with login credentials. The lieutenant governor there dismissed reports of the widespread voting machine issues after fewer than 10 complaints emerged. In D.C., businesses and governments boarded up their windows and their doors. They installed security fencing, non-scalable fencing, in anticipation of widespread election unrest, which there were obviously protests, but nothing widespread. Moving into a couple of major incidences. In Chicago, an Orthodox Jewish man was shot while walking to a synagogue. The suspect, an illegal immigrant, shouted Allah Akbar during a shootout with police. The FBI is investigating, though it's not being classified as a hate crime. In Raleigh, North Carolina, what's now been determined to be an NC State student was firing at passing vehicles along Interstate 40. At least three separate shootings occurred on 3 separate days during election week. And yes, there were injuries. Moving into government oversight, DOJ officials are winding down 2 federal cases against President-elect Trump, citing a long-standing policy against prosecuting a sitting president, which aligns with the 2000-era memo on the separation of powers. Whistleblower complaints allege a FEMA supervisor instructed workers to skip damage assessments on properties displaying pro-Trump signage in Lake Placid, Florida. FEMA investigated. Looks like that person's already been fired. It's not just allegations. Like, it happened. There's screenshots. There's like 20 other FEMA or DHS employees reporting it. So yeah, that's pretty wild. Let's move into the Second Amendment. President-elect Trump announced plans for a national concealed carry reciprocity policy that requires states to recognize out-of-state concealed carry permits. In Connecticut, a recent legal proceeding, including Connecticut attorneys who argued that certain firearms, including semi-automatic hunting rifles, are not protected under the Second Amendment. The case could set a precedent regarding constitutional protections for hunting firearms. In Illinois, a federal judge issued a permanent injunction against Illinois' basically it's their assault weapons and high-capacity magazine ban, or PICA. The ruling was stayed for 30 days to allow time for appeal, and yes, that appeal has already come. So it's going to remain in place until that's settled. Moving into global conflict. Trump advisors are drafting a peace plan for Ukraine, proposing demilitarization zones and conditions for U.S. military aid. The plan requires Ukraine to delay NATO ambitions for 20 years and aims for negotiations based on current front lines. A Chinese foreign national has been arrested multiple times for attempting to enter Mar-a-Lago, or Trump's residence. So it looks like he's probably tried to enter 5 times. He's been arrested 2 or 3 times, and now here's probably the 3rd time. And this time he's being held on a $100,000 bond. 43 lab monkeys escaped from a research center in South Carolina. Some of them have been captured. I believe something like 20 were recaptured. Initially, officials said that the monkeys carry a virus and told citizens to stay away from them and report it immediately, but now they're saying there's no health concern for citizens. Moving into market and economic updates. Following Trump's win, financial markets rallied, with the Dow surging by nearly 1,300 points. Bank stocks and Bitcoin saw significant gains, while renewable energy stocks declined, reflecting investor expectations of favorable policies under the new administration. The DOJ unsealed charges against 3 individuals linked to Iran's IRGC for plotting to assassinate Trump, reportedly in retaliation for the 2020 killing of that general, Soleimani. In Taiwan, TSMC announced it will halt advanced AI chip production for Chinese clients, aligning with U.S. export restrictions. The move adds pressure to U.S.-China relations, with TSMC's stock experiencing some minor declines. Now let's shift into civil unrest, societal collapse, and extremism. Nationwide protests challenging U.S. aid to Israel are scheduled for November 27th to the 29th, including on Black Friday, which is being called a Day of Rage against capitalism. In Seattle, Washington, Antifa rioted on Election Day in that area formerly known as Chaz. In Chicago, 1,500 protesters rallied outside Trump Tower to oppose his election victory, and major traffic was disrupted. In New York, 200 people were arrested during a protest organized by Jewish Voice for Peace outside of the New York Stock Exchange, calling for an end to U.S. military aid to Israel. In D.C., the Answer Coalition led a large protest demanding a Gaza ceasefire and an end to U.S. support for Israel. In Richmond, a pro-abortion activist clashed with the Students for Life of America at an event on November 7th. They pretty much destroyed the booth, and yeah, that was... Hey guys, listen. If you want to, we're kind of giving you just like a one-sentence summary of each one of these civil unrest updates. There's videos, there's links to the sources at thegraymanbriefing.com. Find out more about what we're telling you there. Don't just take this one sentence and try to make sense of it. Let's do one more here. Code Pink and other activists held protests across multiple cities, including at the Amazon headquarters in, I believe it was Seattle, opposing Trump's victory, capitalism, and U.S. foreign policy. That's it. There's so much more, but now that we're combining this week and the last week, and it's pre and post-election, it's kind of, I don't want to make this broadcast too entirely long, so we'll stop here. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening, and as always, remain aware, be vigilant, and stay safe.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the GRAYMAN Briefing.